Welcome to the Truckers Network radio show on tncradio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson. We're a station that offers the news, traffic, weather, sports, talk, and entertainment that our commercial drivers want to hear. Speaking of commercial driving, many may not realize that the Santa Fe Trail played a vital and important role in our nation's commerce. It was not only the nation's first commercial highway, but it was also an international thoroughfare. With us today is Deb Goodrich, the chair of the Santa Fe Trail 200. She works with the Santa Fe Trail Association, which can be found at santafetrail.org. Deb is an historian, author, and popular speaker. She's been a talking head on numerous documentaries, appeared in AHC's Gunslinger series on Wild Bill Hickok, and the History Channel States and Aftershock. She's the host of the Around Kansas weekly TV show. We're lucky to have her today to tell us about the Santa Fe Trail. You know, a lot of people don't know that much about the Santa Fe Trail. What does the Santa Fe Trail Association do?
Well, just exactly what you just said, Shelley, because a lot of people don't know anything about it. It's our job to see that they do. It is probably America's most historic road. One of our friends said that you could teach American history just by teaching the story of the trail. And I would say that that's the truth. So it's our job to preserve physical aspects of the trail when possible, and to share the story and make sure that that's available to generations to come.
It was the nation's first commercial highway, and it had a huge impact on commerce, didn't it, in the growth of the nation?
It can't be overstated, Shelley. The Santa Fe Trail is considered to have begun in 1821 when William Becknell, who was a poor guy who was bankrupt and facing jail time for being in debt, left Missouri, which was a brand new state. They became a state that year, and he headed southwest with a handful of guys and some trade goods. Now, he had said that he was going to go collect hides. Maybe hides were important trade goods at the time, but he was headed for Santa Fe. Now, Americans couldn't legally enter Santa Fe at the time. It was the northern province of Mexico, and Spain controlled Mexico, and they controlled Mexico with a stranglehold. In fact, the whole world was clamoring for Spain to give Mexico its freedom because they just collected horrific taxes from the people, from the churches. The church, the Catholic Church that was predominant, just collected horrific tithes from those parishes in New Mexico, and they were just poor parishes. And it's just staggering to think of what those people in New Mexico, that northern province, were lacking. So unbeknownst to Becknell, Mexico does gain its freedom while he's headed there. So when he gets there, rather than being arrested like so many people had been before him, he was welcomed with open arms. And when he comes into the plaza there in Santa Fe and he starts rolling out his trade goods, which are bolts of cloth, pins, needles, threads, mirrors, brushes, pots, pans, just normal things, the people are just clamoring for these things. And he makes a bunch of money. They had silver there in Mexico. So he goes back to Missouri in the early part of 1822. And when he shows them, that he made an incredible profit on just a handful of things, man, that opened the door. And for 60 years, the Santa Fe Trail was the lifeblood of commerce in America.
So what went into the building of the Santa Fe Trail? I would imagine they had to clear a lot of land, didn't they? I mean, when you think about it, it was so rugged in our nation. I'm amazed that they got anything accomplished. I mean, you had to be really tough to really endure everything.
Well, life, people ask me as an historian, what time would you go back to? I wouldn't go back to 5 minutes before I was born. I would love to walk around for a day and observe, but there's no time that I would have liked to live in. So life was tough no matter where you are, but certainly setting out on those trails. As far as clearing land, the challenges would have been different. The trail follows animal paths, Native American paths. There are paths of commerce or of just travel. Let's just say travel. There are travel paths that have been in place for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. And so what the Santa Fe Trail does is it picks up on those. So there would be pieces of different trails that have been used. We now know so much more about the Native Americans and their trade early on. Like there's a lot of study going on with the lost city of Etzanoa, which is basically just north of the central Oklahoma-Kansas line, where villages of thousands of people have been discovered. And it was obvious that even as far back as 400 years ago and maybe longer, they were trading with both coasts. So it's not that the Santa Fe Trail is the first time there is trade. It is international. It is between two separate nations. It is on a scale unknown before that. And that's a lot of the change that white Europeans bring to the continent. It's not that this is the first time, but we bring a scale that was not known before that, and obviously different items. And one of the big things about the trail, and what again gives it an international aspect, is so many of the trade goods are coming into ports in the Northeast, especially into Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, traveling by pretty much by river and coming to St. Louis and then out the Missouri River and then on down, freighted down to Santa Fe. So they're importing blankets from England, beads from Italy. There are all these international goods that are being traded. So the international aspect of the trail can't be overstated. There are just so many layers to the story, Shelley. It's just incredible.
It's fascinating. Now, where does it start? Where does it end? And how long is the Santa Fe Trail?
So the Santa Fe Trail, as recognized by the National Park Service, we count the starting point in Franklin, Missouri, which is western Missouri on the Missouri River. And then it cuts a diagonal through Kansas. It slashes through Kansas almost perfectly diagonally. And there are two routes. One will go into Colorado by Bent's Fort, which is a very famous National Historic Site, and then down Raton Pass into New Mexico. The other will cut through the panhandle of Oklahoma and come into New Mexico, avoiding that mountain pass. And even though it's known as the Cimarron Cutoff, it's the most popular because it's not as rugged, but it also was the most challenging in terms of finding water. So neither route is easy. And those routes combined, what is federally recognized again, is around 1,200 miles.
What impact would you say the Santa Fe Trail had for our commerce? If it had not been there, would we have grown as quickly as we did in the 1800s?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The exchange of culture, we are truly trading with a foreign nation. Now we are so familiar, as a nation. We go to Italian restaurants, we go to Chinese restaurants, we have entertainment like in Topeka, where I lived for many years, Cinco de Mayo, where the population that immigrated from Mexico still marks so many of their traditions, their foods. even small towns have some of that international flavor. That would not have been so in the 1820s. People, communication was much slower, travel was much slower. It was, New Mexico was exotic. And the lure of Santa Fe, when the Atchison, Topeka, Santa Fe Railroad was created, which is now BNSF, when that was created, Cyrus Holliday was just trying to get wood from Atchison to build buildings in Topeka. Nobody in the East wanted to invest in a railroad from Atchison to Topeka. Nobody cared. But when he put Santa Fe, we're going to try to go to Santa Fe, then that sparked interest. It was so exotic, and people wanted literally the flavor of Santa Fe and that exotic experience of Santa Fe. In real terms, Santa Fe, one of the raw materials that they provided was wool. And so the wool trade becomes incredibly significant between Mexico and the United States. Yeah, the cultural exchange. And then one of the things you talked about, how it became a road. In 1821, they start trading, but in 1825, it becomes a real road. That's when the government surveys it. That's when they mark a real route. That's when they have treaties with the Osage and the Kaw or the Kanze Nation to allow passage. Of course, that was only a piece of the trail. There were other tribes that dominated in other areas, but that makes it a real road. And that is also when Mexican traders start coming north. They realize the value in it, and they start bringing their wool and metals and the things that they have north to Missouri to trade. So it's so pivotal in the growth of America. And unfortunately, the downside of it is displacing many of those tribes. The Kaw Nation, for whom Kansas is named, the Kanza or Kanze, were right on the Santa Fe Trail at Council Grove. That was their last reservation in Kansas. And had that not been such a lucrative spot for investors, they might not have been moved to the Indian nations, present day Oklahoma. They may have been able to hang on. So Kansas essentially kicks out the tribe that it's named for. So it's a complex story.
There was terrible displacement. That's not a proud time for our nation, for sure.
Nope, it's not. It's not.
I hate to interrupt here, but we have to go to break. We'll have some more great history about the Santa Fe Trail from Deb Goodrich coming up in our next segment on the Truckers Network radio show on tncradio.live. Stay tuned for more. TNCradio.live is proud to carry the Steve Summers Overnight Drive Show. TNCradio.live is dedicated to commercial drivers. We offer the news, traffic, and weather you need, and the entertainment, sports, talk, music, and celebrity interviews you want to hear 24/7. We have original shows and trucker podcasts that feature some of your favorites, like Ice Road Alex Debogorski and America's Truckin' Sweetheart Marcia Campbell. TNCradio.live is convenient and designed for professional drivers. The best part is we're free, and you can listen anywhere you are on the road. With just one tap, you can tune into Steve Summers and us right on your phone. Simply download our app by going to app.tncradio.live. That's app.tncradio.live. Industry movement Trucking Moves America Forward is telling the story of the industry. Our safety champions, the women of trucking, independent contractors, the next generation of truckers, and more. Help us promote the best of our industry. Share your story and what you love about trucking. Share images of a moment you're proud of. And join us on social media. Learn more at truckingmovesamerica.com. Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show here on tncradio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson. We're talking with Deb Goodrich, who's been giving us a history of the Santa Fe Trail. She's with the Santa Fe Trail Association. This is fascinating stuff. Would you say the Santa Fe Trail was significant as a melting pot? Because you were talking about the exchange of culture and everything else. I would imagine that was kind of a pivotal influence too.
It was, and people who were on the frontier, no matter where the frontier was, there tended to be mixed marriages, either between natives and white Europeans, between Mexicans and white Europeans, between Blacks and Native Americans. There tended to be a lot of mixed race marriage or relationships and offspring. And so that is, I think, a lot of where the true melting pot comes. The more civilization moves in, the more the strict lines are drawn, and we try to put people back in the place that they're supposed to occupy. But on that frontier, the lines are blurred or non-existent, because you're all about surviving, and you get to know people in a different way, and depend on people in a different way. So many of those famous families, Bent's Fort being a good example, the Bents, very well-educated, well-to-do family from St. Louis, go west and they intermarry with Mexicans, with Native Americans. And so you have offspring of the Bents who are actually part Cheyenne and taking part in taking part in battles where the Cheyenne are fighting American soldiers. So it's a real complicated picture. And so, yeah, it's a big part of the melting pot. And then the other thing with that, you have, when that trade route opens, there are so many families in Mexico who begin sending their children to school in America. So a lot of those New Mexicans are sending children to St. Louis, many of them Catholic. So a lot of them are going to the Catholic schools in St. Louis. But once they are in America, it's just like internationals coming to school in America now. A lot of them get the flavor and want to stay here. And so when the Mexican War broke out in the 1840s, when America goes to war with Mexico, the Santa Fe Trail becomes a route of conquest. But many of those people in New Mexico are loyal to the states, because now they have this identity with the United States, and it's much stronger than their identity with Mexico City, who really doesn't care about them because they're a northern province and only cares about the taxes they can collect. So it's such an incredible picture and such an incredible piece of our westward expansion, and America becoming what it is today, good or bad.
When you think about it, it had to have been kind of a scary proposition for people to travel it, because you're going not only across country, you don't know what to expect, but you're going into another country. How many states were actually states at the time? I mean, when we're talking 1820 and forward with the Santa Fe Trail.
Oh gosh, Shelley, I don't know. Basically, you've got the eastern third of the nation, and you've got California. That's pretty much it.
So people kind of considered that international travel. It had to been.
Oh, it was international travel. You're crossing boundaries, and those boundaries meant something. Like I said, before Becknell got to Santa Fe, anybody coming from America was arrested. When Zebulon Pike was exploring that area in 1804, he gets arrested by the Mexican government and taken to jail. So, and anybody that just happened over the line, they were arrested. So it was truly an international border. And then even once Americans were welcomed into Santa Fe and into that province, there were some really strict rules. And then when trade really started becoming a big deal, then you've got all these tariffs they put on things, and they're going to tax you to death on it because they see the opportunity to make money. And you're dealing with a foreign government. So it's really, really fascinating.
Could you give us maybe a short summary or description of what somebody would experience if they started on the East Coast and made their way across the Santa Fe Trail? What kind of conditions and challenges did they face?
Well, when we were talking about roads, the condition of the roads was, this is rough. This is cross country, so we don't have pavement. If it rains, you've got deep mud. And the Santa Fe Trail is a route of commerce. So you have freight wagons, which are big, heavy wagons, pretty much carrying goods. You have some immigration, but not much. Commerce is predominantly it. So there are not a lot of families. There are a few. The big merchants would carry their families with them sometimes, but there's not a lot of family travel on the Santa Fe Trail. So that's probably the good news. But number one, the road conditions are just going to depend on the ground that's under you. It might be sand, it might be rock, it might be mud. So that's, your number one issue is just that land that you're traveling over. The weather is the biggest factor. It is, you can imagine, a tornado, high winds, where do you go for cover?
Yeah.
I can't imagine that. I just can't imagine what that must have been like. And then you're crossing rivers where you've got to find a good place to cross. And of course, these become popular. And if you're taking a lot of wagons across, they get muddy. They get very difficult to cross when the rivers are swollen. You've got those issues. You've got blizzards and rainstorms and all kinds of stuff to deal with. And so weather is the number one factor. And my sources, I got to go back to this. My sources just told me there are 24 states in 1821.
Okay.
So even though that's about half of our states, it's only about a third to, about a third of our actual physical geography.
Sure.
So, and then you have to contend with either bandits or Native Americans who justifiably resented their land being crossed. And those confrontations sometimes were peaceful. There were some traders who were smart enough to allow for that and pay tribute. I'm going to give you these trade goods for your allowing me to cross your land. And they got along really well. And then some that did not. So you never knew how that was going to come out. So that was a big piece of anxiety. And then when you got to where you were going, you've got a lot of empty space where there's no place to get more goods. Let's say you lose some things in a storm or in a river crossing. There's no place to pick up other stuff until you've gone several hundred miles. So the real fear of starvation, that's a legitimate fear. It's not just something out in the ozone. It's a real fear. And when you get there, you don't know how you're going to be welcomed. Like I said, they may be happy for your goods, but they may have changed the law last week and you're going to pay a higher tariff. So everything about it was unknown. And for women who did travel the trail with their husbands, oh my goodness, there's an incredible book. Marion Sloan Russell was one of those women, and Land of Enchantment. That's where New Mexico got its slogan. Land of Enchantment was from her, and she talked about the perils and the excitement and adventure of being on the trail in those early days. But for women, it was especially difficult. There were women who had children born along the trail, and it was just a horrific experience. And women who died on the trail, and a disease. In the 19th century, no matter where you were, disease was such a huge factor. Cholera, and
Yeah.
it could spread through people, and smallpox. I mean, all those things that you would have had no matter where you are. But again, on the trail, there's no support system. It's just whoever you're with. And so, yeah, it was, every aspect of it was challenging.
Scary proposition. You had to be really courageous
Yes, you
to
did.
go across country like that. How long was the actual trip?
Well, obviously it varied a lot, but a couple of months
Hmm.
was the average. 2 or 3 months, something like that.
Did they have specific seasons when it was more advantageous to go across the Santa Fe Trail? I would imagine winter would have been real tough.
Well, yes, you obviously wanted to avoid the winter. But spring, with the rains could be really challenging too. Every season had its advantages and disadvantages. Summer might be great, but then finding water in summer could be very hard. So you just had to weigh the advantages and disadvantages of every time. And if you waited till fall, yeah, if you got delayed, you could be caught in a blizzard. So most of them were probably made in the spring, um, but people were traveling all the time. When Becknell came back from Missouri in 1822, in that winter, he came in the winter, like in January, and I just can't imagine that he, set back from Missouri at that point. But they traveled it in all seasons, but yeah, they tried to do probably mid to late spring.
It had to be tough. We have to go to break here on the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.live. We'll be back with more from Deb Goodrich on the Santa Fe Trail. Stay tuned. Great leaders challenge their people not to stop at the first right answer. Tighten the Lug Nuts is the book that will help you move past that first right answer to be more effective, more productive, and more successful. This book serves as a blueprint that can be easily applied by leaders, entrepreneurs, truckers, owner-operators, all of us in our everyday lives. This is one of the best leadership books you can read to help you accelerate towards your personal and professional goals. Plus, a portion of the proceeds will be donated to truckerschristmasgroup.org. Visit TightenTheLugNuts.com to order your copy today. Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.live. We're talking to Deb Goodrich about the Santa Fe Trail. I have traveled across this country, and I've just marveled. Tried to put myself back, back in the 1800s, and I can't imagine it. You had to
I
be
can't
really
either.
tough. You really did. Everything was work. And if you didn't do it correctly, it could mean life and death. It really
Yeah,
could. Yeah.
yeah, you could die.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was all tough, no matter where you are. And you read the news. I love going through the old newspapers from the time, and it's like the accidents that happen. Steam was a very prevalent energy source, and all these accidents with steam locomotives or a steam engine or something, and somebody was scalded to death, somebody was run over, a horse ran away, and
Yeah.
we have accidents now, but honestly, um, just reading some of those, they're just, oh my goodness, every day was just a struggle.
When you think percentage-wise, probably traveling, you had more fatalities than today,
I
you
I
know?
I think so.
Mhm.
I don't know that I've got the hard facts to back that up, but I would think so.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure that they were actually tallying that back then.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So, did the Santa Fe Trail play a major role with the railroad expansion as well?
Oh, absolutely. And the railroad expansion is what basically makes the Santa Fe Trail obsolete. Um, when the Atchison Topeka Santa Fe and the Kansas Pacific are both, headed west, and we get the Transcontinental Railroad completed in 69, I think. But then you've got both of these guys heading to Santa Fe, and finally, 1880. So Atchison Topeka gets there first. And so they, that pretty much makes it obsolete. In fact, as the Kansas Pacific is being built westward along the Smoky Hill Trail, which basically cuts through the upper third of Kansas. It would go from Atchison, Kansas, on the Missouri River to Denver. As the Kansas Pacific is building westward, it changes the route of the Santa Fe trail traffic or freight. So it would be taken by train from the Kansas City area rather than freighted. And it would be taken by train to maybe Hayes, Kansas, and then maybe Ellsworth, Kansas, and then to Sheridan, Kansas, which was hell on wheels, the end of the tracks for 2 years. And then it was offloaded and freighted down to pick up the trail, maybe at Dodge City or later at Grenada, Colorado, or someplace, and then finally to Santa Fe. So as the railroads are moving westward, they will supplant the actual ground route of the Santa Fe Trail.
Yeah, I'm reading that in February of 1880, the railroad reached Santa Fe and the trail kind of faded into history.
Mm-hmm.
Is that about the time? Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So can people actually see markers and can they follow the Santa Fe Trail? I would think it would be fascinating to take a trip across country doing that.
They really can. And that's part of what the association does is marking the trail. And there are, if you visit our website, we have a fantastic website, santafetrail.org. It's real simple. And it talks about the various chapters. We've got 15 chapters in the 5 different states that the federally recognized trail is in, that do all kinds of great programming. But the marker program is on there. And so marking that trail is a big piece of what we do. And there are places where you can see the ruts that are still there from the trail.
Oh,
and
neat.
Many of those are marked. And so, yeah, you can follow pretty closely. I know in southwestern Kansas, there's one stretch where you drive on the trail. I think it's like 22 miles where you're driving on the original trail. And then that's on a side road, but then there are main roads that are on the main body of the trail, pieces of them. Because like I said, the routes are essentially the same when it was animals and then Native Americans following the animals and then trappers and traders following those. And then, our trade routes, our main roads all over the country are essentially those same historic routes, with a few curves taken out and a few grading modifications. But those routes have been in place and are still used.
So what does the association do? Are there events? People can participate? You said that, let me look back here. You're the chair of the Santa Fe Trail 200.
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
Well, it's our bicentennial commemoration. So we're marking that from 2021 through 2025 because there are, again, so many significant events in those years to mark. And so 2021, we had an incredible number of events. Despite COVID, we had a lot outside and we had just an incredible number of events. And the next 4 years, we don't have as many events, but we're working a lot more on the outreach. So there are, again, in all those communities, you're talking 5 states. So there's communities all along there that do their individual thing. We have a rendezvous in Larned, Kansas, which is kind of the middle of the trail, every year or every other year. And then we have a symposium every other year. So they stagger. And so this year it will be a rendezvous in September in Larned. And the theme is youth on the trail. So we'll talk about kids' stories from the trail, which are fascinating. And we have great speakers and, some really cool stuff. And then in 2023, our symposium will be in the Kansas City area and focusing on art on the Santa Fe Trail. And I'm so excited about that one. I can just hardly stand it. Right now, I'm planning for an event this weekend in Oklahoma City at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum that has an exhibit on the Santa Fe Trail up through May 1st. And that even though Oklahoma has a small portion of the trail, it's a really significant piece. But of course, that museum is all about the West, not just Oklahoma. But part of the reason we're excited about that is to get Oklahomans educated on their connection to the trail, which is often overlooked. We have a lot of Texas connections to the trail. And so we have a lot of folks coming to this event this weekend from the Texas Panhandle to, explore trail history. No matter where you are, you've got a connection. So there's a lot going on. Just check the website. So many ways to get involved.
Well, I'm sure that our drivers, we have commercial drivers as our audience, they would be fascinated with this because this was the beginning of commerce, which is what
they are. They are the modern day version of those freighters.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I actually grew up in Southwest Virginia, Northwest North Carolina, where we've got so many independent trucking companies and so many big trucking companies. And actually, one of my cousins at one time, he's passed away, but he owned the biggest truck stop in the world. It was there south of, it was near Fredericksburg. It was between Richmond and Washington.
What was
it had
the
its
name?
own radio station, Shelley. It was really cool.
Oh, wow. What was the name of it?
Gerald's Truck Stop.
Oh, very cool.
And so my cousin Orrin was president of the Truck Stop Association of America, I don't know, a dozen times or something. Yeah, so I'm very aware of truckers and appreciate them very much, and appreciate being able to share with them today because they are the modern embodiment of those freighters and all the characteristics we were talking about, the courage and the endurance and all the things that we talk about then. They have to have it now too, because I'm telling you, the roads are scary. So.
They are, and they have a lot of obstacles, like people that don't know how to drive around semis. So, I mean,
exactly.
And that they drive year round. So they've got all of the weather conditions and they know what's going to be happening. Yeah. That's why I thought this would be so perfect, because the Santa Fe Trail is commerce, the nation's first commercial highway that most people don't even think about.
Right. So I really appreciate your taking the time to find out about it, because it's a huge story. And like I said, no matter where you are, you've got a piece of it. I was back in Boston and Philadelphia in January, and again, exploring those connections. You've got goods being imported there that are sent down the trail. Many of the big merchant houses there become involved in the Santa Fe Trail traffic. And one of the things that is fascinating to me, there are a lot of Jewish merchants on the trail, and the relationship between those Jewish merchants and the Catholic Church in Santa Fe are fascinating, and how they work together in the community and still do. Just so many incredible stories that reach far beyond the physical trail itself. The stories are way bigger.
So it was kind of a unifier in many ways.
It could be. It was at times. It could be. There's conflict and conquest and all that, but I think it's more unifying than not. It did tie us together, literally. I mean, once as a result of the Mexican War, New Mexico is the United States.
Right.
So had it not been for that trail traffic, that wouldn't have happened. Absolutely. Good or bad, whether they like it or not, sure. That's how it wound up. And so, it's just an incredible piece.
Deb, we're coming up on our last segment. We have to go to break. This is fascinating. And definitely the listeners need to stay tuned, because you've got more great information when we come back. You're listening to the Truckers Network Radio Show here on tncradio.live. Kathy DeCaro is nothing short of amazing. She not only drives the world's biggest truck as a heavy equipment operator in northern Alberta, Canada. She's an international motivational speaker and the author of Dream Big, an autobiography about overcoming a lifetime of trauma and abuse that led to dreams of success. Kathy inspires people the world over to change their lives and improve their self-worth. Her book will change your life. She's passionate about personal growth and believes anyone can change their circumstances and overcome their obstacles if they believe in themselves. Her life will amaze you and seriously inspire you. Be sure to order a copy of her book, Dream Big, on Amazon.com.
Don't miss Marcia Campbell, North America's trucking sweetheart, Thursdays at 6 p.m. Central on TNCRadio.live.
Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. We are talking with Deb Goodrich. She's been telling us some great stories about the Santa Fe Trail, the nation's first commercial highway, and an international highway at that. So when people are traveling cross country, they could actually maybe be going by the Santa Fe Trail, not even knowing it. I took a train years ago from Chicago to California, and we went through New Mexico, and we went through Kansas and all of that. Would that have followed some of the Santa Fe Trail?
Probably. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the routes. Like there's some people that talk about the trails going on to California. Mm-hmm. There were people who came to Santa Fe and then kept going to California. We don't call that part of the Santa Fe Trail, but it's certainly a piece of the story. Mm-hmm. And you can't take the Santa Fe Trail out of it, really. We may not technically call it a part of the Santa Fe Trail because it gets too unwieldy. And the Santa Fe Trail Association actually operates with a cooperative agreement with the National Park Service. So they help fund the operation of the association because the association does so many valuable things in preserving and promoting and interpreting the trail. So to be federally recognized, you've just got to stop somewhere. So again, it's that 1,200 miles in those 5 states. But the roads that lead into that, you've got, if you look at the trail system, and part of that is on our website, you've got the trails that are coming out of Mexico to Santa Fe. You've got all these other trade routes that are going and immigration routes that are going in different directions. So it's just like today, it's just part of the highway system. It's the piece we focus on. And I think it is the most important piece, but it's just a piece of it. So there's, once you get in, Shelley, you can go in any direction you want.
So people can go on the website and actually look at a big map and see where exactly the Santa Fe Trail was and all the other trails, mm-hmm. and just follow it. They could take the map with them, and
sure, that
would be exciting.
It is exciting. It is. And again, you see the difference in the landscape along the trail, how the flora and the fauna, how it all, the geology, how it all changes. And just imagine, there are some places along the trail that really haven't changed in 200 years. And then there are other places that, where cities grew up or ranches and the landscape has been altered. But there are a lot of places where it's pretty easy to look out and imagine exactly what they would have seen.
So how can people reach out? I wanted to mention that it's really wonderful. Michael Martin Murphey is also involved with your organization. He's such a wonderful musician. It's so appropriate. What a great spokesperson for your organization.
Well, I thought it was really appropriate, and that's why I asked him.
It was Michael, your idea? Well, bravo.
Yes, it was, and I'm proud of it. Michael, he's obviously a wonderful musician, songwriter, singer, part of the soundtrack of my life for sure. But Michael is also such an incredible historian himself, and he is so dedicated to the story of the American West. And he's so passionate about that. He has actually founded a nonprofit called the Murphy Western Institute, and that is not honoring him, it's his pioneering ancestors. And he has amassed an unbelievable library of books on the American West. And as far as cultures, I don't know anybody that knows more about the diverse cultures along the Santa Fe Trail than Michael does. He's just got an amazing knowledge and then an amazing talent to go with it. And I hope he doesn't mind my talking about this, but he and his son Ryan, who is unbelievably talented, wrote a song. I think they called it The Plaza, and it's about the plaza in Santa Fe. And he sent it to me, just the raw version. And when I saw Michael and Ryan a few months ago, I'm like, oh my God, you've created Santa Fe, the musical, because it's so complex. There's so many things going on, so many images. And I said, I'm dying to see this. So that's my subversive motive now, to have that turned into a musical. But he can take all that wonderful knowledge and history that he has and turn it into art. And that's just an incredible talent. And he's got such a wonderful heart and soul.
He can capture things in music.
Oh my goodness. He's amazing.
He's just awesome. I've always been a big fan of his. I love his songs.
Me too.
And this is wonderful. He's an historian as well as a songwriter.
Oh, he's amazing. Great. He was actually a history major.
Oh, really?
Yeah, okay. He majored in, I think, in ancient civilization. I think I've got that right. But yeah, he's just got the soul of a historian. And like his research, in researching cowboy songs and the songs of the Black cowboys and the Mexican cowboys and, all those minorities, the Irish, like his tribe, he says, the Irish songs and, and then he just puts all that, weaves it all together. He's an amazing human being.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
we're thrilled. We're thrilled to have Michael involved with us.
I'm looking forward to talking to him about your association and everything too, and getting his perspective. This is just fascinating, and it's so appropriate for our audience because they're commercial drivers, and this is all about commerce and how our country grew. So and I love history, let's face it. And if you approach history the proper way, it really is interesting.
It is interesting. It's just like, what's going on every day. I mean, what are people doing? What they do, yesterday, what they do 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and they're facing the same challenges. We do talk a lot about, oh, those people were bigger, better, braver, but they're just like us. Mm-hmm. A lot of times I think we do a disservice when we talk about how much stronger they were, because it's all relative, and it gives us an out if we're not as strong. And I think it reminds us that we're all facing the same challenges. They may be wearing different clothes and they may have a little different set, but we're all facing the same challenges, how to provide for our families, how to do better, how we're going to pay the bills, how we're going to make the most of our lives, how we're going to do the things we want to do before we die, check the things off our bucket list. How are we going to do that?
Sure.
They were thinking the same things.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. We have a couple minutes left here. How do people reach your association, Deb?
The easiest and best way is just santafetrail.org. It's a fantastic website. We've got just everything on there, from history articles. We have a link to our quarterly publication, Wagon Tracks. If you're a nerd and really love the history, that is phenomenal. So many great articles about every aspect of the trail. But yeah, reach out, and I think my email is on there. If it's not, it's just publicity at santafetrail.org. So I'd be happy to hear from you.
Excellent. This has been fascinating. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about this because what a fascinating history that I don't recall ever learning in school in such detail anyway.
Well, I appreciate your giving me the opportunity to share the details, Shelley.
Thank you, Deb. You have a wonderful day today.
Thanks, you too.
You've been listening to the Truckers Network radio show on tncradio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson. Stay tuned for more great programming coming up. Thank you for listening to another great interview on tncradio.live. All of the material you hear on tncradio.live on our website, our broadcasts, or our podcasts are copyrighted. There can be no distribution without the express consent of tncradio.live and its partners. For inquiries, write us at info@tncradio.live.